My name is Fatima Idris, and I will be doing the Chapter 7 outline for the various methods in personality assessment. The chapter focuses on the various methods that are used by psychologists, anthropologists, and sociologists for studying personality. Methods in sociology have become increased in disciplinary because of the growing interest of the study of interaction between the person and the environment. Psychology was a forerunner in the systematic development of standardized techniques and instruments for measuring the individual's personality characteristics. The personality assessment has been applied to other methods of studying personality. Lanyon and Goodstein have formed a definition of personality assessment, which is the process of gathering and organizing information about another person in the expectation that this information will lead to a better understanding of the person. Multidisciplinary across the cross-cultural perspectives on personality. Their concept of personality is broad enough to include the measurement of psychological, sociostructural, and situational variables that help us understand why people are the way they are. Observational behavior is the most commonly used method of personality assessment across the discipline line. The problems of the unconstructed observation. The participant observation is a possibility of concealing one's identity. There's structured observation with two parts, the participant and the non-participant. Interviews and questions. Interviewing is another common method of assessing personality across disciplines. Lanyon and Goodstein. 4 reasons why face-to-face interviewing might be preferred over the self-administration or telephone survey. 1. Less structures, more flexible. 2. The questionnaire is designed to establish a personal rapport with the interviewer with the subject before proceeding. 3. The interviewer may be able to give careful personal attention to the distributor and not be confused. Interviewing allows for both obvious and subtle reactions. Predetermined interviews, predetermined interview schedules, and also the no definite interview schedule, non-standardized or unstructured. Standardized interview is the most effective. The disadvantage is the limitations on the scope of the research. Interviewing factors that may inhibit or facilitate communication. 1. Competing time demands. 2. Ego threat. 3. Etiquette. 4. Trauma. 5. Forgetting. 6. Chronological confusion. 7. Inferential confusion. 8. Unconscious experience. Gordon has 8 potential facilities of communication. Fulfilling expectations. Number 1. 2. Recognition. 3. Altruistic appeals. 4. Sympathetic understanding. 5. New experiences. 6. Catharsis. 7. The need for meaning. 8. Eccentric rewards. The problems of reliability and validity in data collection. The reliability refers to generally the repeatability or the dependability of the instrument of measure used by researchers. The sick rates, however, do not relate low morale reflect the low morale because other factors such as epidemic disease might contribute to high risk rates. Each method has own sets of aims. The construct validity is a validation of the theory behind the measurements. Construct validation is thus a process of documenting supportive evidence from a variety of sources. Content validity is the extent to which a measure adequately represents all significant components of a phenomenon in question. Cross-cultural studies provide the data challenging the adequacy of the design model. The personality tests. Most widely used personality assessment by psychologists. It's a standardized instruments designed to measure personality rates of an individual. These rates are enduring personality characteristics or stable dispositions that are independent from the situational fluctuations. Assumed in personality tests. A. Stability of personnel dispositions over time. B. Prevalence of major common traits in all individuals. C. Comparability of individual traits in terms of their strength. D. The sum total of measurement traits as one's personality. E. The situation or conditions under which personality tests are administered are identical for all respondents. For example, if John took a personality test and scored high on aggression, anxiety, and authoritarianism compared to his friends, John's personality would be characterized by a sum total of those traits. These assumptions are implied in all standardized personality tests. There are numerous personality tests which can be grouped into two categories: A, objective or direct; B, projective or indirect. Active or direct test. Objective personality test. The subject is asked to make a choice between two or more alternatives: true, false, agreed and disagree, or other multiple choice items. Subjects respond to the objectively scored for comparative responses. Objective tests equal direct tests. Only the responses to the test are monitored, not behavior, while taking the test. Objective tests are more cost-effective and efficient, but tend to result in superficial, overgeneralized responses compared to projective tests. Faking is an additional problem. Test takers wishes to create a good or bad impression. Detecting devices have been implemented to avoid faking. The tests include one of the best known and most widely used objective tests for personality inventory is the Minnesota Multifaceted Personality Inventory, or the MMPI. It has the scales L scale, the number of times a subject fakes to create good impression; the question mark scale, the number of times the subject does not respond at all; the F scale, faking for bad impression; and the K scale, similar to the L scale, but is designed to correct the main clinical scales by improving their discriminating functions. In sum, the detectors have greatly reduced distortions in these tests. The MMPI contains 14 scales: hypochondriasis, depression, hysteria, psychophatic, deviant, masculinity and femininity, paranoia, psychasthenia, schizophrenia, hypomania, social introversion, anxiety, repression, ego, strength, and alcoholism. The critiques, though, are: A, it's designed for screening clinical patients, not adequate for normal personality; B, the test retest ability is poor over time; C, the test is too long and repetitive; D, the validity of the reliability depends on the demographic, socioeconomic, and cultural characteristics of the subject, such as age, sex, education, and ethnicity. Asians have a higher score on the test than Americans, but when diagnosed, show lower psychopathological symptoms than Americans. The test is not accurate for Asians. Despite criticism, MMPI remains the most prevalent personality test. The projective or indirect test. Projective tests are indirect methods of assessing personality by presenting the subject with various stimuli or materials and documenting the subject's unconscious responses. Projection is an ego defense mechanism, according to Freud. Also a way of interpreting the external reality based on the internal world or of emotion and cognition. To be simply put, it's the subject's tests are supposed to reveal the representatives, the respondent's subject world with functions to construct a meaning of the objective reality. There are 5 types of responses. 1, association techniques; 2, construction techniques; 3, completion techniques; 4, choice of ordering techniques; 5, expressive techniques. And then there's the Rorschach test, which is a Rorschach co-diagnostic test, or commonly known as the Rorschach inkblot test. The test consists of 10 cards on plates, originally published in the book Psychodiagnostic in 1921. The cards contain different colors and shapes which have no particular meaning. The meaning must be constructed by the subject. There is no right answer, but it is standardized. Second stage of testing, to identify the cards in sequence. Scoring the test is complex. 2 introductory manuals for the beginning students: Klopfer and Davidson, 1962, and Allen, 1968. The Rorschach test is used extensively in cross-cultural examinations. The thematic apperception test, the TAT, originally designed by C.D. Morgan and Henry A. Murray. Test consists of 30 black and white cards, and the subject is asked to make up a story based on each card presented. A test of imagination, which is a projection or representation of the subject's personality. The theoretical basis of the TAT comes from the Murray's theory of needs. The earliest clinical use of the picture story method can be tracked by Schwartz. Murray's assumption was that the individual's satisfaction or dissatisfaction about their needs, like aggression, nurturance, affliction, achievement, dominance, dependency, and sex. Two rational assumptions that guided Murray's initial work with the TAT. One, that the attributions of the hero or main character in the story represent tendencies in the respondent's own personality. That the characteristics of the hero's environment represent a significant aspect of the respondent's environment. The criticism against the TAT include 1. Very little standardization in the interpretation of procedure. 2. Low reliabilities. 3. Too heavy reliance on intuitive hunches in interpreting the meaning of responses. 4. The difficulty of determining the congruence between the subject's expressed fantasy, the characteristics of the hero in the TAT story, and behavior in real-life situations. Although the test has been in cross-cultural research and cross-cultured validity, its cross-cultured validity has not been firmly established because of the equivalence problem of language and the pictured content. It is proved that the subject with a different set of stimuli that were not included in the original tests. The Lanyon and Goodstein, they both warn that the Rorschach test and the TAT test are vulnerable to faking. Content analysis of life history materials. It includes the oral history of non-literate people collected by anthropologists, case histories of mental patients analyzed by psychiatrists, biographists, autobiographies of famous people, and the letters, diaries, and other personal documents largely studied by the psychologists and sociologists. The content analysis refers to a systematic method of analyzing the symbolic content of oral and written communications. 1. Selection and definition of content categories that is relevant to the research objective. 2. Sampling of materials that represent the content categories chosen. 3. Quantification and determining of salient categories. 4. Analysis of the quantified or salient categories in relation to the variables. The most classic and monumental study of the life history materials is the Thomas and Zanicki's The Polish Peasant in Europe, America. Thomas chose the life method by accident. Intro into his life history materials is always problematic, lack of objective criteria. The analysis of the history materials will undoubtedly become a more important method of research for personality traits. Analysis of folklore material. Folklore is a diverse cultural material that are usually orally transmitted from person to person. Myth, folktale, legend, joke, epic, folk, speech, proverb, riddle, superstition, game, folk dance, festival, curse, the blessing, etc. Folklore constitutes the most valuable document not only to understand the nuances of the culture, but also to grasp the general psychological pattern of who share it. Most common functions of folklore. 1, aiding in education of the young. 2, promoting a group's feeling of solidarity. 3, providing a socially sanctioned way for individuals to act superior or to ensure that other individuals. 4, to serve a vehicle of social protest. 5, offering enjoyable escape of reality. 6, converting dull work into play. Folklore requires a multidisciplinary and cross-cultural approaches. For our personalities, there are major approaches. 1, the psychoanalytic interpretations of symbolism and folklore across cultures. 2, correlation studies between various themes in folklore. The actual behavior patterns like child training practices. And 3, an intensive case study of the folklore of a particular society. Fromm's psychoanalysis of the Little Red Riding Hood. The Little Red Cap, Little Red Riding Hood. The Little Cap of Red Velvet. Menstruation / adventures equals problems of sex. Wolf equals a seducing man / tricks the Red Riding Hood / disappears after satisfying appetite. Wright study of child training practices and folklore aggression. George O. Wright analyzed 12 folktales for each 33 societies that were among the sample of 75 societies. Their study was used of child rearing and personality rights, finding and summarized by here. Number 1, the analysis for the folk tale data supports the essential features of the theory, which was developed to supply insight into the consequences of the outcomes of action and behavior in folk tales. 2, it is found that high punishment anxiety, when it is connected with the expression of aggression, leads to a kind of folktale behavior where the object and agents of aggression are far out of the generalization continuum and least like the hero. 3, low punishment anxiety, connected with the expression of aggression, leads to folktale behavior where the objective and agents of aggression are chosen close to the hero, so the generalized continuum. 4, high punishment connected with expressions of aggression equals aggression behavior in folktales that is true for low punishment anxiety. 5, finally, the study demonstrates the folktales of a fantasy material and are fruitless for analysis. The Benedict study of the Zuni mythology. Popular theme of abandonment. An expression of resentment directed by children against their parents and worked out into a daydream of the children's imagined vantages. An expression of resentment directed by children. So the resentment and other identifications of the child is clear in the tales of the boy who gambles and ruins him. Another popular theme in Zunis, which reflects culture somewhat obliquely, is the death of self by summing up the apake. These tales have been understood against the cultural fact the suicide is unknown and even unconceivable to the Zuni mind, and violence is culturally a taboo. The daydream is particularly a characteristic of Zuni in that it provides a meaning of achieving the imagined and without the necessity of the violent act save on the party of the Apache. The following illustrates the ways the researchers have attempted to article the relationship between folklore and personality, most by intuitive analysis, but also by empirical research. The examples raise 3 arguments. 1, folklore may reflect culture and personality patterns of an earlier stage in the society's history and not to the present. 2, folklore diffuses widely one society to another. Some folktales do not reflect unique ethos. 3, from presence of particular folklore motifs, we can't tell whether the motifs do directly express a characteristic pattern in society or whether they are wishful fantasies of reaction formation. The last argument is the most serious because it concerns content validity of the folklore, the truthfulness of the folklore theme for representing the actual behaviors of the situation. Talked about punishment, the wickedness of men. God decided to flood the earth and kill all except the chosen man Noah and his immediate family. The contrast between the Western version of the legend and its Chinese counterparts are very surprising. The Chinese legend did not name any person, as Noah was named, to be favored by the god and spared from disaster. Instead, all Chinese should take all refuge in a boat or flee the country to somewhere else. Instead, they remained where they were born and lived. There were no questions of sons going in different directions from their fathers. Finally, by not visiting his wife during his many years of work, Yu put his larger duty before matters of his own heart. The important thing is that over the centuries, each person is in tune with Noah's and his sons' lack of concern of kinship, continuity, and ancestors. Like the Chinese must have forgotten non-individualistic approaches of emperors Yao, Shun, and Yu, agreeable. The passengers from Sue's American and Chinese, in a way, address the arguments raised by Bernau. The problems are an epidemic in all interferal or indirect methods of personality studies, including the interpretations of dreams, art, and music. Important is to recognize and project the projective significance of folklore material, even in the interpretations are vulnerable to the research subjective bias. The analysis of the socio-cultural products, music, art, are also provide the researcher with invaluable sources for studying personality. A systematic review on the words for interpreting of art and music cannot be attempted here. Analysis of art and music. Constructing lifestyles of American and Chinese are captured in paintings. The American is focused on the individual. The Chinese focuses on the individual's place in the grand scheme of things. For music, it equals a collective representation of cultural ethos. There are many other folklore materials that reflect cultural values and social attitudes of a certain group of people. Children's rhymes and games in their relation to the development of social character. The choice of personality assessment procedures depend on 1. The nature of the scope of the research, 2. Accessibility to the subject, 3. Availability of time, human and material resources, and 4. The legal and ethical considerations. And that's all I have for that's everything I have for my Chapter 7 outline. Thank you.